All right, we're going to call this meeting to order. Welcome Santa Fe High School Band. Thanks for being here, and everybody else. It's just they're more dressed up than most of you.
You're a little bit more obvious.
Yeah, we can see who's here. Probably are. Let's stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to the New Mexico flag in both English and Spanish, as well as the acknowledgement of tribal land after that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, el símbolo Zia de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas.
We acknowledge the original people of the land, the Tesuque Pueblo people and other tribal nations, and ask them to walk with us today as we share and learn together. Thank you. Next up, we have the approval of the agenda. I'd like to move the Santa Fe High School Band, which is currently listed under board announcement and follow-up, though nobody might see that. We'll do it as a school board showcase. And we'll do it as the second one. It's not listed on the agenda. It's listed on my super secret noted agenda. It's not secret at all. Any other changes or questions on the agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve? I think we'll say Vice President.
I recommend that we approve the agenda.
Okay.
And I second.
There's a second. A motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Now we have the introduction of the interpreter, please.
Good afternoon, Board President Noble, board members, Superintendent Dr. Garcia. My name is Germán Martinez, and I'll be serving any individuals that will need translation services. If you would like translation services, please raise your hand, and I will provide that in the back of the room. Buenas tardes, Presidente Noble, miembros de la Junta Escolar y Superintendente Doctora García. Mi nombre es Germán Martínez. Serviré como traductor. Cualquier persona que ocupe esos servicios, por favor, levante la mano y le serviré atrás de la sala. Gracias.
Thank you very much. Now we are on to the school board showcase. And first we have Ferris Wald. Is Ferris here? Hi. Oh, you're doing double duty tonight. Well, we'll start with presenting you with a certificate, and we'll go down and take a photo. Ferris is here because he submitted his abstract and presentation materials in this role of getting your certificate for NOAA. You could probably tell us what that is, but it has to do with weather, right? And it was a virtual science fair for 16-17. I don't really understand the notes. In April 2019, you submitted it in the spring. Okay, in June, the board was informed that he won first place, and I believe it was written up in the paper. Is that right? Was it written in the paper, you winning? Okay, I think so too. So you're here tonight to demonstrate your award-winning submission. That's very exciting. All right, if you want to go to that podium where we have a microphone for you. And apparently Ferris studied statistics at the Santa Fe Community College this summer. So welcome, and please tell us about your submission to the virtual science fair.
So my name's Ferris Wald, and I'm currently a junior at Santa Fe High School. And as noted by the board members, what I did is over the summer, I submitted my project to the NOAA Ghost 1617 virtual science fair and got first place. And that's prior to previously when I submitted to the Google Science Fair and got first place for my state. Well, I'm sort of unprepared because I was just alerted last 5-6 minutes ago that I would have to give a speech, but I'll try my very best, I assure you. Well, I think what I took from this lesson and from my past 3 years of doing science, I mean, I've done science fairs for 6 years, but over the past 3 years, I've had the opportunity to go to state science fair. I won the Broadcom National Science Fair for my freshman year. And last year, I went back to New Mexico Tech, Highlands, and all those different science fairs and did my project. And what I've learned about this is the beauty of the Santa Fe public school system and STEM in providing me where I want to go. I've learned, I mean, at times life can be very scary. You get sort of overwhelmed by everything. You feel like you're inconsequential. You hear about these stories across the world, and you feel like you're just a little tiny speck in the greater things, the greater things. And I think what we need to realize is that we do play a part in our shaping who we want to be, and nothing is impossible. When I went to the Broadcom Science Fair back in freshman year of high school, I was sort of stunned because I never expected me to go all the way to nationals. And when I won with all these amazing people, there were 30 people across the entire nation, and they were A+. So they're amazing, incredible individuals, and I commend them because they will be the next leaders of the future. But I think the beauty of the Santa Fe Public Schools is that opportunities are everywhere. They are in the teachers, they are in the students who, I call these my band family because they support me even in my darkest times. I have my parents who are wonderful individuals. And there's just so much resources here that we just need to learn to utilize them and to move forward in a way. Well, I also want to talk a little bit about STEM. STEM is very important, and I think it's something that must be capitalized on. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math, and I know some people who are taking advantage of STEM, such as my friend Steven, who is currently trying to go into New Mexico Tech, and is currently, he does amazing stuff, but this Santa Fe Public Schools, the beauty of it is just you have opportunities, and for us and for everyone in this room, use them because it'll pay off in the future. Thank you.
What a beautiful speech. We're going to actually ask you to stand here with us and take a picture. Okay, congratulations, Ferris. I think you might have given us a new tagline for the Santa Fe Public Schools. Opportunities are everywhere. That's pretty good. Okay, now on to the Santa Fe High School Band. And this is under the direction of Todd Miller. Where's Todd? Hi, welcome. Thank you for bringing the band here. And you'll be performing marching band songs, I understand. So now let's do that. Thank you for coming.
next number is the opening number for our competition field show. Oh, yes.
Set. 1, 2, 5, 6.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Santa Fe High School Band. And I should have noted at the beginning of the meeting, for the record, Secretary Garcia is excused, and of course, Board Member Carrillo has arrived. Ooh, look at the water bottles.
Don't lose it. So, just real quick, I just asked, I don't know if we can do anything with the agenda at this point, but I heard from the principal that Gary, who's being introduced under my section, who is receiving an award, has to leave at 6:15. He won a Fulbright to Cambodia, so I was going to recognize him. Think we'll be okay? Okay, I'll just put him first. It's up to you.
Okay, we are on to public forum. Is anybody signed up for public forum?
Board President Noble, Superintendent Garcia, board members, we have 2 people signed up for public forum. We have Rosalind Gomez and Bill, I'm going to mispronounce your last name, I'm sorry, Varnum. So if you 2 could just come on up right over here, and we'll go ahead
Actually,
and
if we can, as a point of privilege, just because I don't want to get too pushed, we're going to let the superintendent do one of her announcements right now, and then we'll move on to public forum. It'll just be a couple more minutes, but we have a student who has a teacher, sorry, who has many things to do, many things, and we only know of a few of them. Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Gives me great pleasure tonight to recognize Gary Bass. And Gary, if you'd like to come up and maybe stand at the podium in case you'd like to say a few words, and then we'd like to take a photo with you. He's a teacher at El Camino Real, and his principal is here today, Mr. Jack Lane. Thank you, Jack. He is a teacher at El Camino Real. He won the Fulbright Award to Cambodia. He's an El Camino teacher and is one of 13 U.S. citizens to win the Fulbright Distinguished Award in Teaching Short-Term Program Grant. He will spend October in Cambodia implementing an English language program. He currently teaches digital literacy in Spanish and English, where he runs an after-school STEM club. He is a national board certified teacher in English as a new language. He has previously taught in China, Syria, and Vietnam. Gary received his BS in elementary ed and his master's in curriculum and instruction from New Mexico State University, and holds a graduate certificate of ed technology and information literacy from SUNY Buffalo. The Fulbright program is the flagship international educational exchange program sponsored by the U.S. government and is designed to build relationships between U.S. citizens and the people of other countries that are needed to solve global challenges. We're so proud to have you in our district. Would you like to say a few words?
Well, sure. Thank you very much, Madam Superintendent and Madam President, for allowing me to skip ahead. I actually have a hockey game that I need to get to. We're in the city tournament right now, so. But yes, the Fulbright exchange it's a short-term one that I'm on. And like Ferris had said, I mean, there's opportunities for students and there's a lot of opportunities for teachers too. And I try and let my colleagues know that. And I'm excited to represent my school. And without the support of Jack Lane and Dr. Garcia, who, I don't know if you remember, but it was 6 months ago when I submitted a request for potential leave for this, and I did receive the award. So the opportunities are there, and I appreciate the support of the Santa Fe Public Schools. I'm going to be a representative of my school, SFPS, and also the U.S. government. It is a Department of State position. It's a short term, 1 month, and I will go and help them implement an English language curriculum program in a local school. So, like I said, these leadership opportunities for teachers are there too, and I try and promote that with my colleagues. I appreciate the support that the district has given me in this, and I plan on communicating with my students. It's almost exactly on the other side of the planet, so we're like 13 hours ahead, but I can communicate because I'm the computer teacher through Google Classroom. I can be posting assignments, and we'll see about FaceTime. That's, I'll be up at midnight while they're in class. So. But thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll gather and take a picture. And Principal Lane, please come down and join us. Okay, we will postpone the other superintendent announcements and follow-up. And sorry about the false start, Mr. Carl, but now we will do public forum. And we'll only ask once. If you haven't, is there anybody who hasn't signed up for public forum who would like to speak? Okay, so for the two folks who have signed up, please.
So if the two, you could just come on up. Rosalind Gomez, you are up first.
Mr. Carl, I'm not sure you've read the rules yet. I think we need to do that. And
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get started, my apologies. I'm going to read the rules for our public forum. Please listen and speak with respect. No uncivil conduct will be permitted. Please do not discuss any specific student who is not your own. There's no sharing of time. Please self-monitor and observe the 3-minute time limit. I will give you a 30-second warning when your time is almost up. Public commentary and dialogue is allowed only during the public forum, not throughout the meeting. Please search for answers on common ground. You may speak on any topic, whether it is on the agenda or not. Your input will be taken into consideration. Please be advised that the board may discuss your issue during the meeting, but by law, the board cannot take actions on items that are not on the agenda. Sure. Okay.
come forward, please, and just say your name for the record as you begin to speak. Thank you.
My name is Bill Varnum. I'm here to speak on the disposition of the old tennis courts at the Santa Fe High School.
I'm sorry, is your mic on?
It is.
First of all, I'm both a tennis player and a pickleball player. I've been playing tennis for decades, and a few years ago I started playing pickleball. As I get older, it gets harder and harder to get around the tennis court because it's pretty big. Pickleball is an interesting sport because it's a sport that sort of equalizes men and women. It's not heavily dependent upon just raw strength. So there are a lot of women that play pickleball. We sort of equally divide up when we're playing pickleball among men and women. It's a great sport for people who are getting older too. I was trying to think of how many people we have playing pickleball now, and my best guess is about 50 pickleball players who are relatively active. I would like to recommend that we use the old Santa Fe High tennis courts for pickleball, and I recognize that we have to have some organization that's going to maintain those courts to satisfy the school district, if the school district is willing to give up those courts. I think the obvious organization would be the city of Santa Fe. I don't see any reason why that couldn't be in conjunction with the county of Santa Fe if they wanted to split costs on that. So anyway, I would like to recommend that these courts be used for pickleball. We don't have any dedicated pickleball courts in the city of Santa Fe, so we have lines that are marked off for both tennis and pickleball, and in some of the gyms we have other lines for badminton and other things. It gets very confusing, so it would be great to have some pickleball courts that are dedicated to pickleball. So anyway, I think that this is a very good use of those courts. There are 9 courts. Pickleball is essentially always played in doubles, so each court has 4 players. There are 9 courts, so that would be 36 people who could be playing all at the same time, which at least at present would probably be enough courts for everybody that wants to play. Right now, people sit out about half of the time because the courts are full wherever we're playing. So that would be enough courts for essentially everybody.
30 seconds.
If it got more crowded, the courts could be divided up because pickleball courts are smaller, so we could get even more courts if we wanted to do that. So my recommendation would be to use these courts for pickleball. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, hi, my name is Rosalind Gomez, and I'm just here to support Bill for pickleball because I feel it's important. And also, it's not strictly for the older people, younger people. I've been teaching my grandson, I've been teaching my granddaughter how to play it just for the hand and eye coordination, and they love it. And so I'm here to support Bill, and it would be nice to have more pickleball courts for the city of Santa Fe also, you know. It's a great game. It's great exercise. It's, my health has improved since I started playing, and everybody should play. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes public forum.
Thank you very much. On to the union update. Ms. Mayer, good to see you.
Good evening, Grace Mayer, NEA Santa Fe president, and our teacher at Milagro Middle School. There's a couple announcements. We're going to have our first welcome back gathering for our employees at NEA New Mexico on Friday, the 20th. So I'm hoping anybody watching or listening, if you work for Santa Fe Public Schools, come join us. We're going to have food and spirits and a good time. And we are planning a possible board forum for the candidates running for school board, or an interview process with questions, but we are meeting as an exec board tomorrow to make that final decision, and then we'll reach out to the candidates. Some are here, some are not here, to schedule either one of those things. So we're looking forward to hearing from our board candidates and making a decision who we will endorse through our membership process or through the elected executive board of NEA Santa Fe. There's a couple of things I'd like to bring up this evening, and they are regarding supporting teachers and staff at the schools from the community and from the school board. There's a couple of issues that are happening with our parents and our who come to drop off their kids and pick them up at many of our schools. Lots of times there's a lot of pressure for people to be present when school is not in session, very early in the morning, because parents are dropping their kids off 15, 20 minutes before anyone is even in the building. Sometimes there is a hired EA or a person that is hired in the morning to do a morning sort of duty shift. But a lot of times I think that parents aren't really aware that when school starts, you know, at 7:50, they can't really drop off their child who's 5 or 6 at 7:30 or 7:25, even if they have another child that has to get somewhere else. So I'm really asking that we start to firm up some of that, and we start to tell our parents that, yes, we're here to serve you and your children, but there has to be a working day length that doesn't exceed contractual hours for people, and there has to be adults present to supervise, and enough people to make that doable. And I think a lot of times there's this expectation that, well, the teacher's there, look at the parking lot, it's full, but a lot of us go to work early or stay late so that we can do work in preparation for instruction. We're not there to assist because, you know, there's 10 kids that were left in front of the building, and obviously we're responsible adults and we do that, but we shouldn't really be asked or pressured by our principals, and we shouldn't really be asked or pressured by the community. We love our students, we just need to also be able to prepare for instruction for the day and run copies and do that kind of thing. Also with pickup, there's a lot of issues around that. A lot of parents they often say they can't get here in time, or there are other things, and that is not okay. You know, we have to say, okay, the day ends for people at 3:10 or 3:40, and then those students need to be brought into the building, and the parents need to be called to pick them up. or they have to make other arrangements. We have after-school programs in a lot of schools. We have vans that come from Boys and Girls Club and other places to pick kids up. And I think that there's just been this, because we've been so kind of welcoming and embracing and in our way in Santa Fe, that our community has, I don't think that they intentionally take advantage, but I think that they just think someone else will pick it up. And I think we have to say, no, we have boundaries, and I'd like for the board to help with this. I'd like for the superintendent to help for this, and we've talked about this a little. And for the principals to say, okay, you know, the doors are shut until this time, and I'm sorry. You know, and for our older kids too, I find it a little distressing that they're being dropped off a half an hour before school starts or more, because they have a tendency to walk away. And I see them walking away. And I oftentimes say, hey, you know, you need to go back to school. You were dropped off at one place, but they want to pick up a bag of chips or do this, whatever. And, you know, there's only so much as a teacher we can do in a parking lot to stop children from crossing the street to go, you know, to the supermarket, right, or whatever. So I think that parents need to be aware that it's also a safety concern. And, you know, we have to decide that we're going to take more responsibility. And if you can't get your kid there at the time that's appropriate, put them on the bus. It's the safest way to transport them anyway. So I don't understand that. But anyway, if we can have kind of more rider participation on our buses, I think some of that would alleviate maybe some of this going to 3 different schools because you have 3 different kids at 3 different levels or something. There's also, I think, an expectation with a lot of parents too that we hold special events and open houses and all these other things, and they're great. But, you know, there's only so many stipends that can go around to pay for that, and we need more parent involvement and parent volunteers in our PTOs and people showing up. And if we can get some of our volunteers to not just maybe do tutoring, but to also, you know, adopt a school, have somebody and 3 people, you know, come and do morning bus duty or come in, you know, during literacy night and help out. Because we can't always guarantee that people have to, you know, can be there. Because first of all, it's beyond their contract. A lot of times it's voluntary. And if you have a child yourself or you're taking care of an older parent or you have an appointment, you just can't make it. I mean, trust me, I know I've been going to doctors a while. I mean, you set appointments 3 months in advance. You're not breaking that appointment, you know, because you're not getting in for another 3 months. So there's things like that we have to consider. And I think that we want to embrace that idea that every school is a community school, but we're not open 24 hours. And it's not a drop-in kind of thing. You know, there's certain contractual obligations, and there's also, you know, just the fact that we can't all do it all the time. There has been some movement with some teachers and some involuntary transfers because of some low enrollment at some schools, which is understandable after the 10th day. This always happens every year. But unfortunately, this year, I think the communication wasn't that great and things didn't go very smoothly. And there's some hurt feelings, and I apologize to those teachers. But, you know, there are certain decisions that have to be made at a district level that we don't always have control over. And when we're losing enrollment and kids aren't showing up at certain schools, we have to move teachers to other locations. But I think one of the main reasons why this is happening is not just enrollment, but that we have too many schools. And we've had this conversation. It's a difficult conversation. I think that we need to consider repurposing the schools that have been already identified as structurally not fit, really, anyway, and that either you need to invest a lot of money to refurbish or repurpose. And I think we have an opportunity to repurpose in that we can maybe make a pre-K school or something that academy or something. And I also think that we have to look at rezoning with some of the K-8s back into the middle schools, into both Milagro and Ortiz. Ortiz has, are short some teachers, and I think that if we move some of the students from maybe the K-8s and turn them back into a K-5 and went 6, 7, 8 to back to Ortiz, then we wouldn't have that problem, because we wouldn't have the need to duplicate kind of the teachers at some of the K-8s. You know, obviously, and I said this years ago when it was being built, Aspen and Gonzales being so close to each other is completely unnecessary. And I think we need to look at maybe working on something in that direction. This is all in the purview of the board to make these decisions. The union really has nothing to do with it, other than our contract says how displaced people will be moved. And it's different than a RIF, and I think a lot of times people hear teacher leaving, they think teacher RIF being fired. That was not the case. It took me multiple conversations to convince people they had a job, but you know, it's not the job they signed up for at the beginning of the year. They made a connection with their students and they're disappointed, and we understand that. But I think that this board owes it to the new people coming in, or to make the hard decision about some of the other schools that we've been talking about for the last several years. We can't just maintain facilities because, you know, there's 100 kids or 110 or 90. You know, you have to look at, and you guys made the hard choices with Milagro. I'm telling you, closed 2 middle schools. We were all here. But, you know, now we have to figure out, okay, what are the hard choices we need to make with the schools that, I mean, are we really going to make the investment in the infrastructure of those schools to rebuild them? The answer is no. But is it, I think, the right thing for this board right now before they leave to make those decisions? Yes, because the new people coming on are not going to have the history of what happened. And they're not going to be in a good place to make that decision because they were just elected by the people that were in their district they were representing. So if we can relook at some of the work that's been done by staff about those structural things, I think it'll solve some of what's happening with displaced employees. And also, I think the quality of the education will be better because the facility will be nicer. I mean, Aspen's still being built. I mean, why we would take anybody out of there and not try to put kids in is kind of an odd thing to me, but I see what happened and I understand the logic from the district's perspective. But, I mean, I think we need to logically look at everything and say, okay, where are we going with it? You know, that was a difficult conversation, and I'm probably going to get a lot of emails, and you guys will too. So that's my update for today.
Thank you very much. Maybe if you'd stay at the podium, I
Okay.
think Board Member Cuddio had a question. Board Member Cuddio.
Well, I'm concerned as you are about the early drop thing. And I understand, and I've had people talk to me about that at the schools that I represent, that parents, and I think they're not thinking about a contract, they're just thinking about what's convenient for them.
Right.
Right? And so I'm wondering if the superintendent can reach out to principals and just reiterate, have the principals reach out to parents and say, look, we're not a drop-off center. And is it a half an hour? Is that when typically schools will allow?
No. Staff's there 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after usually, because we're there for a half hour beyond the contract, so 7.5 hours. It depends. Sometimes, well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Is teachers are dedicated and they come early and people don't realize. I mean, even some teachers don't even know what their start time is because they get there at 7 and they leave at 5:30. So they're like, whatever. But, you know, they don't want to start their day until they're prepared and ready.
Yeah.
And so that's a different thing. And having duty every day is making their jobs difficult. And it's duty that sometimes isn't even required in their contract. But, you know, they're just sort of taking care of the kids that come that way.
So as far as the board goes, obviously that we can't get involved in that, but
I understand.
I would hope
but
that the superintendent would reach out to principals and say, hey, look,
But,
parents.
you know, this gets aired in the
Yeah.
community, and I think we need to start saying to our community, yes, we love your children, but you need to drop them off at the appropriate time and pick them up.
Well,
and
you
be
know, when your kids go
responsible.
to pre-K, if you're late on pickup, what is it, like $5 a minute or something? I'm not, we can't do that. We're the public schools. But that's what they do.
Not in
And
our
all-
pre-K, and it's been happening.
But that's what they, and you come on time, because that $5 a minute adds up. Yeah.
And I'm sure it's uneven just because I received an email last week from my child's school reminding parents of drop-off times and
Right.
not to bring your children before that. Board Member Cashman.
I would agree. It would help if the superintendent would go ahead and talk with the principals and then get letters out to a parent, because I've experienced that when I used to teach too, and I used to be there way early, and you get there, teachers get there early to get prepared for the day, but then, you know, there are some teachers that are there all the time, and so you know, you can't, you're not gonna leave a kid out in the freezing weather, and the only way that I know, at least one principal that is, she said, this is what's gonna happen, and it's gonna happen effective that, and the doors are gonna be locked. You're not gonna be able to get in, and your child will be out there in the cold, and we aren't responsible for that child because school hasn't started. But if you could remind principals to talk with parents, and it's just as important, not only on the drop-off, but because, you know, they're dropping off their child thinking that child is going to school, and kids can wander. And so all of a sudden they're saying, I dropped off my child on school property, but the child never made it into the classroom. And after school is just as critical, even though there are a lot more people after school because of, you know, programs, after-school programs. Not all those kids go to after-school programs, and having kids wander the hall, not being gainfully employed is a problem too. So if you could, I would agree with Board Member Carrillo, if you could maybe just, if the board would ask the superintendent to just reach out to our principals and let them know that this is creating some concerns for our staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, on to board announcements and follow-ups. One piece of sad news, and I think it's Secretary Garcia did make clear that he would not be coming tonight because his close friend, who is also our state senator, Carlos Cisneros, died somewhat suddenly, I believe today. So certainly thinking about and sending love to his family and friends. And we saw him just up at the LFC. I think he's the vice chair of LFC and was with us in Red River, among other things. So, yes, condolences to his family. Also, we have, I think, does everybody have these, Dr. Garcia? We have the agenda for our legislative breakfast, as well as the legislative priorities as we requested from the superintendent. So I don't.
Also, info sheets, Ruth, they're at each board. Do they have these? We should have them too.
Got it.
So do those priorities look all right? Does anybody feel the need to discuss them? There's 6 of them. And we can always bring it back in board discussion if we want to leave it for a moment.
Well, the challenge
Okay.
is for us procedurally is that if we do it in board discussion, it's like an agenda item that's not there because it's not under board discussion.
To be honest with you, Madam President?
Yes, please,
These were
Dr.
the
Garcia.
priorities that you all agreed to
Right.
last time.
I understand.
You had just asked for some board sheets and just to have it for you. The meeting is tomorrow morning, so I mean, if there's any adjustments, we'd have to do it tonight, which we can do.
Yes, Board Member Cashman, then Vice President Price.
I would like to, because we could run out of time, I would like to change the order of our priority. I think probably, at least for me, the number one priority has to be the sensible gun violence control. And mainly because even though it's going to be a financial session, it's costing us a lot of money between cameras, single point entry, robo-locks. This is a financial issue, not only for us, but for all of our school districts. As we try to secure our facilities, there's a cost to that. And, you know, so gun violence is part of that, or gun control is part of that cost. Not to have it in place just makes us more vulnerable. So I would think that might be our number one priority, because it's not only funding, but it's also safety and security of our sites and of our children and our staff. So I would recommend that be pushed up to number one, so in case we don't have enough time, but maybe it's too late to change the ordering number, but maybe it's not.
Vice President Price.
Under the sensible gun violence control, I also wanted to have the magazine, the number of bullets per gun that could be purchased, and it's not here.
Okay.
What is that called?
High-capacity
Thank
magazines.
you, high-capacity magazines.
Okay, somehow that wasn't picked up from the notes. I know Ruth tried to capture all the notes, and I think you all can talk to them
Yeah,
about these
okay.
issues. Or you could just not have these legislative sheets, and you talk
From that.
from the agenda and tell them what your thoughts are. There was a request for legislative sheets or info sheets. You know, I would be asking Ruth to stay late tonight to change it,
Okay.
which we can do if that's the request of the board.
No, I guess I would,
Well, on that, my understanding was that was going to be rolled into sensible gun violence legislation, the magazine capacities.
yeah.
That's
Oh,
the
it's not
danger,
in-
that's the
it's not in-
danger in creating legislative sheets, is we don't capture necessarily
yeah.
everything that every board member said. So you could either, we went back and forth, because it was a request to have them, but I was hesitant because I was worried just about this thing, that it's not gonna capture what everybody is
Yeah.
saying. So you can just talk about your
Okay.
items and just go with the agenda too, it's up to
Okay.
you.
So what I'd suggest is that we don't ask for any changes in the printed materials tonight, and that Dr. Garcia, I assume it will be you leading the meeting, and that, and I'm happy to help in whatever way, but that we make it very clear that our number one priority, and I would agree with Board Member Cashman on this, just because it's you know, the hierarchy of needs things is safety and security, but is sensible gun violence control. And personally, I think the legislative sheets are a good idea, just because legislators, like everybody else, are sometimes verbal, sometimes more written learners, and may take them away and get something from it. And I think we should just speak to it and say, you know, of course, not everything can always be reflected perfectly, and we did have that in mind as well. So I would just say let's
And we can possibly change this, you know, the order on the agenda wouldn't take us long just to change these. It's up to you. We can just leave the priorities and just say they're all our priorities, but
yeah, I think it's fine not to change the
Okay.
printed materials, but just to speak to it very clearly in the
Okay.
morning. Board Member Carrillo.
I would say we are going to run out of time because people will be late. They're going to be getting their breakfast and not even probably sitting at the table until 8:15. I would, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. I would say that we should probably think of removing items 5 and 6 this time around. Yes, they're extremely important. They are. There are so many important issues that we'd like to address to our northern delegation. And then, I mean, I agree on the gun violence and obviously on education funding. Part of that goes to issues related to sensible gun laws as it relates to schools, education, and security. So, I mean, I don't need, for me, that there doesn't need to be a reprioritization. There just needs to be maximizing the 45 minutes that we'll actually have with them. And I would say, if need be, just eliminate, we can have it on the sheet, the education sheet to leave with them, but on the actual little sheet, the one thing, maybe just eliminate items 5 and 6.
Board Member Cashman.
I would not agree on eliminating 6 because this is killing us. You know, I talked with Dr. Garcia about it. It's like saying, okay, for a neurosurgeon, you have to retire after 20 years. However, we still need neurosurgeons, so I'm going to just hire somebody off the street to fill that role. You know, our teachers, we know we have a problem in the pipeline, and it's going to get worse instead of better. You know, I don't know why any teacher would come back and take the type of penalties. This is financial, and so I think just like we would do for our policemen, our firefighters, we need to have some sort of exemption and say, yes, the goal is laudable, but in the meantime, we need a waiver for at least the next 5 years so we can try to figure out what we're doing because, you know, we know, I mean, and I'm sure our school district is not the only school district. We have a lot of senior teachers and even our transportation workers. I want somebody that knows how to drive a bus, not say, well, you can drive a car or something, get on the bus and take our kids. You know, I mean, it's killing us, and so we need to keep, if that qualified staff wants to come back, we can't penalize them to be paying into the retirement system. It doesn't help them. It's just money into the retirement system. It doesn't, so I'm not, I mean, if I had to eliminate something, I'd eliminate pre-K because we're not quite in the business of pre-K. But maybe what we could do is just make sure we just speed up the conversation and get through all of these items. But I think we do need to call the change that you made on the retirement system is killing us. It's killing, at least that's my opinion.
I agree with Board Member Cashman on that. I think it's really important. Board Member Carrillo.
I agree too. So, and I would agree also with the idea of eliminating item 2 because you're right. We're not, we're in the K-12 business, not the pre-K business. Where we get funding, yeah, we have pre-Ks and we have great pre-Ks. But the endowment thing is something that is really relative to our purview of K-12, not there. And after hearing you, what you said, Maureen, I'm just going to come tomorrow morning, have a bagel, and roll with it. So whatever it is, it is.
What I wanted to say, Madam President, if I could, is that this isn't the only time we talk to legislators. And so if there's important issues, you know, we have our lobbyists. Josh is our legislative governmental relations officer, as well as our general counsel. I also work with the legislature. So as issues come up, we continue to talk with them. So this isn't our only bite at the apple. And if we don't get time to get, you know, we can say these are things that are important to us. You've got the legislative sheets, but in the interest of time, we'd like to talk about these 4 first, because I could make a good argument why pre-K should be discussed. But because we really are a P-12 system, we're not a K-12 system. And but I think you all can prioritize how you want to spend your time, and there will be some other issues, I guarantee you, between now and the session. We also need to talk to them about capital, and so as we get those requests done, then we'll work with our lobbyists to go meet with them. So I think we'll have other bites at the apple.
The other thing I was going to say, which is along the lines of what Dr. Garcia said, is if we wanted to, because a number of the members of our delegation cannot come tomorrow. So we could also draft a letter from the board and say, these are our priorities and, you know, here's some supporting information. And we've realized how much, I mean, not that it needs to be a revelation, but emphasizing how much of the issues that we deal with are really controlled by the legislature and that we need to call on them to deal with some of these things. And I would put the ERB issue way up there too, because in a teacher shortage and where we are now, it's just not making any sense. But I think ultimately, let's keep the printed materials the same, and we will try and run a tight meeting and really get through the things and do whatever follow-up that's needed. And, we do have a good lobbyist, and that's probably the most effective work that we do. Okay, good. Moving on. Thank you.
No, board announcements.
Yes, I was going to move on to other board announcements.
I thought you were changing
What,
categories.
Board Member Cashman.
I would just like to take the opportunity to thank everybody that worked on that back-to-school bash. It was great. Turnout was wonderful. Everyone had a good time. So I know that it looked like it went seamlessly, but I know all the hard work that goes behind something like that to pull it out. So thank you to all the staff and everyone that showed up, and the public too. And just a reminder that Albertsons was there handing out flu shots, and I didn't see that they were so busy, but Christus is going to have a flu clinic. I think it's October 16th, but it's really important that everybody get their flu shots. It's hard to stay healthy if you don't have a flu shot, and at least you might get the flu, but the severity will be lesser.
Board Member Carrillo.
Echoing what Ms. Cashman said relative to the back-to-school bash, that's really become a highlight event of the district. So, Superintendent, thanks very much for that. And David, and just everybody that put that together. But also this year, there were more community partners too, which was also really cool to see all of our more of our community partners there. It was hot. God, it was hot. But it was a really great day. The other board announcement I have is, as I understand it, from just walking in here and somebody texting me, Santa Fe High School is ranked 10th in the state in football at this point. Is that right, Joe? Do you know how long? I didn't have gray hair the last time that happened, okay? It's been a really long time. So it's super exciting. And they're in Bernalillo Friday, but then they come back, I believe, at St. Mike's, Capitol at Moriarty on Saturday. But all of our teams, it just seems like all of our athletic teams, volleyball, soccer, football, everything's just firing on all cylinders. So I just really just urge the public. It's so fun. I would just urge the public to go to these games and support our kids.
Excellent. And one other announcement that I wanted to make was just to say thank you very much to Dr. Garcia or whomever got us reusable water bottles. And maybe at the end of the meeting, if we can indulge, we can all take a picture with our beautiful, because we have unique colors, not to mention our names on each of them. So thank you for following up on that, and it's great to see so many reusable bottles. And again, great job on the Back to School Bash. It was just super fun. My child and I, said we'd stay an hour and a half, and I'm pretty sure we stayed all 3 hours. And there was so much going on. It was really great. Thank you. Okay, moving on from board announcements. Superintendent announcements and follow-up, please.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'd like to start off with the Back to School Bash and thank all of you that participated. And what was the most heartwarming to me was to see the children and the families interacting, whether they were with the big cardboard boxes and building things, but just the pure joy. And it was a safe family event. For 3.5 hours or 4 hours, it was just pure bliss, right? And we all like, oh my God, this is coming up, and the principals, it's tough to get, folks to come and just to make it all happen. And it just comes together. We had twice as many community partner tables than we did last year, and we had 30 the year before. So I think we had 62 community partners that have participated and want to be a part of it. And a lot of new events this year for the kids, but just I think of the memories of children of, seeing their own school table or seeing, the other schools, and just the joy of going to this, and the sense of community of all of us coming together from all over the city. is just such a heartwarming thing. And so we have a little 3-minute video, and yes, a shout out to David and his team, and a special shout out to Sabra Roybal, who is our volunteer and events coordinator. And all the planning that she does all year. And I know sometimes you've seen it where it'll say planning, planning, planning in the weekly reports. But I was asking David, I says, I sure hope we have all of this documented because, it'd be tough if Sabra left to recreate this from scratch. But it's a team effort. Thank you to everyone who participated and who came. So David, let's watch a 3-minute video on the bash.
Welcome to our 4th annual Back to School Bash. And I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our principals, all of our sponsors, the community partners that are here that make this event possible.
Wonderful to see all the great activities from our schools and all the partners, so thank you very much. It really does take a community. We all need to support our schools and parents and families and the kids getting their education and doing the best they can to learn.
This is a partnership between the city and the schools and all of these phenomenal nonprofits. Fire department is here, the police department is here, sheriff is here, city, schools. We are collaborating because these are all our kids. At a certain level, it doesn't matter what department you're in, these are our kids. And we need them to succeed, we need them to thrive, we need them to have great education, great health, and a great community to be part of.
Thank you. Yeah. Just a quick update on the school safety video. We had a meeting with some select principals and staff, an expert on trauma, Dr. Catherine Courtney, April Miller from the Skies Center, and they are currently working together we're going to make a modification for a few grades on the video, and then we're working on a script for the lower grades. And we're very close to being ready to try to launch this again. But we're still working on our process of how we'll get the information out. We're also working on some FAQs for parents, as well as talking guides for parents and families to talk how to talk to their kids about it. So it was really good. It was a very good meeting. So we're moving forward with that. I also have, and I wonder if they're here waiting. Charlotte and Rudy, you guys here? Oh my goodness, I would have moved you up earlier. I should have been paying better attention. But we have Santa Fe Public School student winners of the art competition at the state fair. Charlotte Carter from El Dorado Community School. You're going to come up and we'll won first place in the middle school division, and her teacher is Kelly Ryder. Yay! And Rudy Roybal Jr. Is Rudy here? Okay. Rudy was from Gonzales Community School, honorable mention, middle school division, and the teacher is Lori Getz. Yeah. All right. Well, do you want to accept the certificates and let's take pictures. Thank you again. I'm sorry we kept you waiting. Also, the Santa Fe Public Schools received $89,658 in Indian Education Act funding. We're focusing on college, career, and life readiness, culturally and linguistically relevant education and social-emotional learning, and culture and identity development, and increasing access to Native American language programming. And that concludes my announcements.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the consent agenda. Anyone have any questions, or we could entertain a motion? It looks as if only Secretary Garcia was absent for the September 3rd meeting for the minutes.
I recommend that we go ahead and approve consent.
Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving all the items on the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to action items. Number 9 on our agenda, we will postpone item A, the 2019-2020 Board Committee appointment to the CRC by Board Secretary Rudy Garcia, given that Secretary Garcia is not here. So on to action item B, right of entry agreement between the Santa Fe Public Schools and Verizon Wireless. Dr. Garcia.
Oh, thank you, Madam President. Ask our General Counsel, Josh Granata, to go to the podium. This is about a right of entry agreement between Santa Fe Public Schools and Verizon Wireless, and they are exploring the idea of constructing a communications tower or collecting on an existing structure and installing communications equipment at El Camino Academy. All they're asking for right now is permission to enter and inspect the site and to temporarily locate communications equipment on the site to conduct short-term radio propagation tests to determine the suitability. The agreement is for 180 days. We made no recommendation. We brought it to you because we understand this has been, before my time, a volatile issue. So Mr. Granata can answer any questions you may have.
Board Member Carrillo.
I mean, I would say that since this is only a preliminary testing period, I mean, it's something that I would vote for, but when it comes down to the implementation and a contract and all of those things, and we may even want to do it now just to give the public a, the heads up, I think this should comply with our early notification, our early neighborhood notification process. Did we all hear what I just said? I think this should comply with our early neighborhood notification process. The reason being that, boy, I remember, I don't know, when they tried to put that tower at the Burger King, my God, it was just insane, the city council meeting that night. So, I mean, I think if we're going to consider something of that nature, that we should, you know, notify within the parameters of the ENN, those people around Camino Real Academy. I mean, just because we do that with other projects on properties, and I think it's just the respectful thing to do as the district, since it affects the neighborhood.
Board Member Cashman.
I guess to err on the side of caution, I would agree with that. However, I don't think that would change how I would vote, because the science isn't there with what happened at by the Burger King. But I understand that may be just good public outreach to go ahead and hear what the neighbors have to say.
It's also not legally something that can be considered under land use policy. So as a land use issue, there are line of sight things, and the Planning Commission and the City Council go through this every time. But legally, as a land use consideration, the science of what happens with cell towers is not under their purview. Board Member Carrillo.
I would agree with Board Member Cashman. I mean, on the science side, I don't necessarily agree, but it's on the being a good neighbor and making sure that nothing comes back to bite us later side. Go ahead, I would do this.
So I would suggest we move forward with this. There are, I believe, and we can ask when and if anything comes back, because as you mentioned, Board Member Carrillo, this is exploratory. There are approvals that need to happen in the city through land use, and at this stage we're not there, because this is, as I understand it, Verizon basically exploring whether this would be a place that they want to request to site a tower. And if they do that, then there are approval processes that would be ours, as well as others relating to the neighborhood.
So, I mean, I could be completely wrong here, but Superintendent, I'd be interested to hear from council, because my understanding is we can pretty much build whatever we want there. That we're kind of exempt from a lot of the city provisions. And, you know, that's why we've often gotten into some of the trouble that we've gotten into in the last years. So I would just want to make sure that, I mean, if there are things that we have to do relative to the city, then absolutely. But it's just my experience has been, it's like, and the perfect example is the gym at Atalaya, where it was originally supposed to be on the other side in the design. And yeah, sure that the neighbors didn't want it, and sure the city didn't want it, and nobody wanted it, but we were going to do it anyway, because we didn't have to. You know, and that's why this early neighborhood ENN. That's why the ENN was adopted by the board at that time, because their perception was that we were not being sensitive to their views. And I don't mean the views of the mountains, I just mean their ideas and things. And we really did. We spent a lot of time with Joel, and I was on that task force working on that. So I just want to make sure that, you know, that we're good neighbors. And so do we have to, I mean, can we, is the code such that if we really wanted to allow somebody to do something on that particular property that we don't have to, my understanding is we really don't have to seek anybody else's permission with the public schools?
Board President Noble, board members, Dr. Garcia, Member Carrillo, I haven't really looked into that specific issue. My general understanding, though, would basically agree with what President Noble was saying, and that the city does have, you know, certain purview and ability to regulate cell phone towers within the city. But if the board does go forward with this agreement, I'll certainly look into that specific issue and be able to give you some more guidance with regards to that.
Okay, because and the reason I would, to me, it would require even earlier rather than later more scrutiny is that, I mean, I can think of when we were having plans for Manderfield, when we were having plans for the old Agua Fria site. There's lots of things that, and I'm happy to be wrong here, but there's lots of things that the city may or may not have wanted that we didn't have to do if we didn't want to. So I would be really curious about the specific thing relative to cell towers.
Okay.
So if you ask me, that cell tower by Nino Otero between Capitol, that doesn't look like a palm tree or a pine tree at all. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think you're correct. We could opt in probably to an ENN and partner with the city, but ultimately as a governmental entity, the process goes through the state and through the CID or something like that, commercial improvements. It's not that I don't think we can do whatever we want. I think we have a different oversight process as a governmental entity. But what's the pleasure of the board on this item?
I mean, I don't see a problem right now with them exploring this, but I think it is going to become an issue. And I'd just like to make sure that we stay ahead of it and that we're good neighbors.
May I?
But so far as tonight goes, I would support moving it to the next step, unless I hear it's different from the Super Council.
Dr. Garcia.
So I'm a little confused. I don't know if you are general
Well,
counsel.
we need a motion.
But I'm not sure, yeah, we can have a motion, but, which of course, but I'm not sure what's leading up to it. Are you saying go forward with it, with the exploration, but in the meantime, get input from the community, or get input from the community before we okay the exploration?
Board Member Cashman. then Board Member.
I think we should go ahead and approve this as written, but be aware that we may want to, a little bit downstream, start an ETN notification and notify those. But that would have to be a separate approval act because we didn't notice it. But I would say right now, we go ahead and approve as written this
Are you up for
agreement.
making a motion?
Yes, I would like to go ahead and suggest that we approve right of entry agreement between Santa Fe Public Schools and Verizon Wireless as written in our board packet.
Okay, I'll second that motion. Board Member Carrillo.
My friendly amendment would be, I think the only way I would support it is with a friendly amendment that concurrently we begin our district's ENN process.
Board Member Cashman, is that friendly?
Yeah, I'm just,
I can say it's not friendly to the second. I think that until we know that they even want to do it, I don't want to spend district resources doing a notification process that might be entirely unnecessary.
I would say that we just cleanly approve this tonight and then maybe bring it back in the beginning of the year and see where we are and what type of feedback we're getting from Verizon, because they might not even, they may come back and say, this really isn't a good site.
Yeah.
And so, but I agree with you that the community is going to probably come back and raise some concerns. But I also think Board Member Carrillo is correct. We are a different type of entity than the Burger King, and I'm not sure it might help us to look to see, can we just put that cell phone tower on our own property, and it doesn't have to be agreed to by the city, and I think we can, but I'm not an expert in it. So I'd like to keep the motion tonight clean, so I'm not going to accept the friendly amendment. And
Board Member Carrillo.
Okay. You know, I'm not overly attached. But what I am attached to is, though, if we could be conscious of this, the next time this does come to us, when they do say, hey, this is a great place to put up a fake-looking pine tree, that we notice it differently on the agenda. Because of the way it's noticed on the agenda, it's very innocuous. You know, those people in the community that may be concerned about something like this, they may not be looking carefully. I would say we really notice it, that it has to do with a cell phone tower or use the communications tower, or that's in the notice if this should come back to us. And that's not a friendly amendment. That's nothing. It's just trying to just be conscious of that in the future. And so I'm fine voting for this tonight without the ENN.
And just on that point, Madam President, just as a matter of course, all the materials are posted online so people can, but I agree with you, we can make it more specific, but they also have access to this sheet.
And I agree we could notice it more clearly. I would also say, having sat through hours and hours of those hearings, and lifetime I will never get back, the people that are very concerned about this would see Verizon Wireless on the agenda, and antennas would go up, so to speak.
Yeah. Alrighty. Yeah, oh, good. Yuck, yuck, yuck. Slow on the uptake there.
Okay, we ready to vote? Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 3 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Granada.
We are now moving on to the presentation on middle school soccer. Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, at this time, our Assistant Superintendent for Athletics and Activities and School Support, Mr. Larry Chavez, based on the board request, is making a brief presentation on middle school soccer. It's very high level, and but I think it'll give you the information that you requested. Mr. Chavez, if you can hold your questions to the end of the presentation, I think it'll make for a smoother presentation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Garcia, we're going to go through what it takes to develop a program for Santa Fe Public Schools, some of the problems, some issues of implementing such a program, but also some solutions at the very end. So this is just some talking points so we can get started. So as you look, our first slide shows that all of the surrounding schools do not offer middle school soccer. So what that does is it creates an issue whenever we're going to implement an NMA-sanctioned sport. So again, when we talk about NMA-sanctioned sport, there are also requirements that come with it, such as certified coaches and transportation, officials, stuff like that that we'll get into. But no surrounding public schools currently have any middle school sports for 7th or 8th grade soccer, boys or girls. So program development and challenges, some conflicts that could happen. Lack of athletes, just as Grace Mayer mentioned, the way we're set up, the way we're structured with our schools really cuts into what programs we can offer. If we were set up traditionally, such as the 7th and 8th grade academies across a district, then our pool of students are much larger. So whenever it's a K-8 school, the population between 7th and 8th grade student athletes are a lot smaller than a 7th and 8th grade middle school. So we could look at such as Gonzales with 54 8th graders, and then look at Ortiz with 222 8th graders. So the difference, is really transparent when you look at the number of students at these different schools. Lack of certified coaches, I don't think this is anything new. It's not only at Northern with their club coaches, but also with high school coaches across the state and not just within the city. Right now, what happens is whenever we have out-of-season coaching going on, our high school coaches cannot participate with 7th grade students. It's forbidden. So they cannot, according to the NMA bylaws, coach any 7th grade students. Also, our out-of-season requirements are only 7.5 hours to work with their sport. So whenever soccer ends, those coaches can only have 7.5 hours to work with students that are going to be funneled up into their program for the entire academic year. So the NMA does not govern summer, but it does during in session, and so that means we would have issues with overlapping. One issue could be, do we make a recommendation of our high school coaches coaching at the middle school level, but that takes away the hours that they would devote to their high school team. So it's tricky there. Again, we had a lot of difficulty, so does St. Mike's as well, filling positions at the high school level, not only for head coaches, but also assistant coaches. I talked to Northern, they're having a difficult time finding certified coaches to fill in their club teams as well. Here are some quick options, just something that we were talking about, developing partnerships with local soccer organizations such as Northern. That's something we explored about a year ago. We continue to explore this option because that is something that they want that we may like, but it's an option that we can explore. Club development per site rather than NMAA sanctioned teams. What I mean by that is per site is per school. So if they wanted to run it as a club, it's completely different than running it as an NMAA sanctioned event or sport. They don't have to have a certified coach. We don't have to worry about transportation, officials. So the cost, and I know this has been a talking point at some of the middle schools I visited, they would like to see a club develop it at the site. One of the things we talked about, expanding high school programs to sub-varsity teams that include 8th graders. We currently have this option available to all of our high school teams, soccer teams. We right now have at Capital 1 boy and 1 girl participating at the high school level, and at Santa Fe we have 2 boys and 3 girls. So the 8th grade participation is very low, but that doesn't mean it can't grow. We have to do a good job of promoting, getting our coaches into the schools, really talking up their programs, and making sure that they understand it is an option for 8th graders currently to play up. Cost analysis, if we're going to implement it fully across the district, again, NMAA sanction requires a lot of these officials to be paid. It talks about the middle school stipends according to the CBA. Equipment, you know, that's a low-end estimate, and it really is soccer balls. Soccer balls are close to about $35, $45 a ball. So, you know, we would have to really work on the implementation of a rotation to replace equipment. But again, this is just real quick transportation if we're just doing within the city, not traveling outside the city limits. Between 8 schools would cost us about $5,600 annually, about $40,000 to run something throughout the district. Good. Yep. So I stand for questions.
Board Member Carrillo.
First, I want to thank the superintendent and you, Larry, for Mr. Chavez, Dr. Chavez, no, I know it's Mr. For just jumping on this so quickly and giving us this report. So clearly it's not tenable right now to do something like this. There are too many obstacles in the way. It's the club thing that, the coach, the guy that was the director of coaching at Northern, I want to say Patrick, he's an English gentleman.
He's English, I've met with him
Is it
before.
Patrick?
No, I don't think it's Patrick.
Oh, I can't remember. No. But anyway, because he and I talked about this probably starting 3-4 years ago, and with a soccer parent from Tierra and Cantata, and
It's
you know, just trying to
Nick.
do the club thing.
Sorry, Nick.
Correct.
Nick,
Smith.
yes.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Nick.
Nick
So
Smith.
is Nick still the director of coaching there?
I have not heard.
Yeah, but whoever the director of coaching is, I think pursuing the club idea, so then it's just left to the principal and the kids there and the parents. It's not, I love that idea, and I just want to, I'm very grateful for all of this information. Kind of puts the kibosh on any idea I had around doing middle school soccer, but it makes perfect sense.
And we'll
So-
continue to explore those options.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Well, then I do have wasn't it Capitol High School that had the goalie that was the 8th grade goalie? Oh my God, yes, this 8th grader was unbelievable playing for the Capitol boys, right? Or was it Capitol girls? Yeah, it was, it's amazing sometimes when we boost them up to the sea level of our sea level in 8th grade. So, it's exciting.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. Okay. Moving on to item 11, board discussion and possible action. The Old Santa Fe High School tennis courts. Board Member Cashman.
I put this on the board discussion and possible action to have us as a board direct the superintendent to begin an investigation of what's going to happen at the old Santa Fe High School tennis courts. I've talked with the superintendent over time. We've known the minute that ground broke for our new tennis courts, which are outstanding, but we need to do something with the old facility. We need to be good neighbors and not let that old facility deteriorate. More. But I have been approached by various people in the community. Obviously, we heard from some pickleball players. There are no dedicated pickleball courts. I know some of the pickleball players have reached out to Mayor Weber saying, what are you going to do? So that's an option. I know that First Serve has expressed an interest in those courts. I know that members of just the general tennis community have expressed an interest because they say the city isn't maintaining those courts, their own courts, so why can't we go over and play at the old Santa Fe High courts? And I know that Dr. Garcia said that there have been some soccer folks expressed interest in using that for soccer skills, not for a soccer field. So there's a lot of people that are looking, and one person asked about sustainable housing for that site. So there are a lot of people that are interested in that site, but I think for us as a board, you know, we need to figure out also I think it was reported to CRC to demolish those courts is close to $300,000 to $400,000 to return that site. So we have a site that's still functional. So I would like to propose that we ask the superintendent to look at and come back to the board on some recommendations for what that site might be useful for. If we were going to partner with somebody, I don't know who, they would have to also have financial resources to maintain that facility, and I think we would want a very short-term lease to make sure that is going to be maintained and that they have a non-compete clause. And why I say that, this is a new idea when people said, well, we want to run a summer tennis camp. Well, our high school teams sometimes run camps over the summer to make money for their programs. So what I'm asking is for the board tonight to take action to direct the superintendent, and probably by the middle of November to come back and see who's interested out there. And, you know, I even said, you know, if nobody's interested, but we don't want to demolish the site, maybe we put in more solar panels there. But there's a lot of interest out there and so I'm trying to be proactive rather than let the site sit there and we have problems with, in the past, we have had homeless people camp out in that facility. So I'm just trying to be proactive while the courts still have some lifespan in them. Maybe this is an opportunity to reach out and, you know, be good partners with the city or the county or another entity. So my proposal or my suggestion is the board tonight direct the superintendent to look at potential uses for the old Santa Fe High School tennis courts.
Board Member Carrillo.
I would support that as well. And so just if there's another person that would support that as well, then terrific. In middle of November seems reasonable. Now, the biggest concerns I would have in the report are, I don't want this to cost us a nickel. And then the biggest, I mean, ever. And then the other big concern I have is that regardless of who does what there, they're going to encounter the same challenges we did relative to the civil engineering and the runoff. And, you know, that's why the courts, we resurface, we do all this stuff, and then, you know, eventually they'd crack again. And it's just because of, we should have never built anything there to begin with that needed that kind of stability. And that's my recollection. I mean, I don't see Ms. Yonda Wagner, but that's my recollection from being our CRC and stuff. So I think the idea of a very short-term lease to make sure that whatever entity used it is viable. I love the idea. That was good thinking of a non-compete clause because we do run programs. And, but just don't want this to cost us anything. And I don't want us to have extra insurance for any reason. I mean, anyone that comes there needs to be bonded on their own. Because it's a liability right now. It's on our property. So I'd be in favor of really doing a deep dive on this one.
Dr. Garcia.
Madam President, members of the board, and I don't know if Ms. Wagner, she had to leave. We apologize. Mr. Chavez, did she tell you what I know the CRC's recommendation was to demolish, and but do you remember what the cost was? I don't remember it being that high. $290,000 to demolish them. I do have the concern about the liability, and I know that we've talked about that I don't know that we can entirely remove ourselves out of the liability piece of it if they use it and don't maintain it and it has cracks and people, turn their ankle or break their leg or, heaven forbid, something worse happened to them. So that is a concern that I would have, because I would imagine that the CRC vetted this fairly well, or no? So you were on the CRC.
Yeah,
so
I was on the CRC. The CRC has never made a recommendation on what to do with those courts.
Huh.
We were told that they made a recommendation, should we build new courts at that site or move them to the new site, but we haven't talked about the old courts. We did talk about what it would cost and the demolition. So,
but there hasn't been a recommendation?
So, but it wasn't a recommendation. So what I'm just saying is we need to come up with something, so.
Mr. Chavez is going back to the podium. May I yield to him?
Thank you. So talking about that, just to point of clarification, it's a line item in the renovation of the Santa Fe High campus.
Yes, but the CRC never voted on that. We just had to cost it, saying this is a cost of doing business, but the CRC hasn't made a recommendation to the board on what to do with those courts. It was just that if we build at the new site, we are going to have to do something, and what I'm saying is we may decide to demolish, but the CRC did not say. So I'm asking the superintendent to just, I know there's, I mean, there are people that are interested in that site, and so I'm just saying is I would recommend that the superintendent come back to the board with some recommendations, and the recommendation may be to demolish it, but there may be the city. I know that, at least from my understanding, the mayor has had a lot of pressure from at least the pickleball community saying, what are you going to do? And obviously that might solve some of the city's problems until I think I have heard that they may eventually build pickleball courts out at Swan Park, but that's still a long ways off, so this might be something that's interim, but,
Board Member Carrillo.
So what I heard Mr. Chavez say was that, in a sense, there was a recommendation because the line item was part of the overall Santa Fe High School renovation. So that's that's what I heard. I mean, I still think that's a lot of money for a demolition. I imagine most of it's just hauling the concrete away. Yeah. And and then so I still would like to look into, but again, not a nickel, no liability, nothing on our end. And I think that would just satisfy the pickleball community. Why is it called pickleball?
because that's the name of the game.
Oh, just curious. And then I would like the mayor to spend, if he's going to spend any time on the pickleball, I'd like him to spend as much time on housing. It's just, we need housing more than we need pickleball courts. So, but anyway, I would be your second on that if they had a third to look into it more.
So it sounds like on some level, perhaps the budget was approved. This was, or at least recommended, this was a line item. But that, and I appreciate the perspective that there wasn't sort of consideration as to what should happen here. There was a recommendation, obviously, that was made budgetarily. I'm happy to ask this. I think we should probably think about what to do with this. So I think that makes 3. Superintendents can count to 3, you once told me, right? But I think, you know, to look into and just have a little bit more of a considered process as to what we should do with the old tennis courts, I'm happy to support. Do you want a motion?
It's up to you. I'm good.
I think we're clear. Okay, tobacco policy. Board Member Carrillo.
So my name's next to this, but it was all of us that wanted this here. So we could discuss it further around, and I know that Ashley from the American Cancer Society and the different groups that are supporting this are here also to field questions, also to let us know, because I let them know. I was with a couple of their members today and let them know kind of what our concern was around somebody's going to a basketball game, they're a smoker, they have cigarettes in their car, and they're technically on our property. And then what do we do? Because if it's like a zero tolerance for any product anywhere on the property, these are members of the public coming to an event. And so that's why this is here. It's not my issue. I'm curious, how do we handle something like this when John Q. Public just wants to come, you know, watch the guys play in basketball?
Is that a question, or is that rhetorical?
No, it's not rhetorical, because this has to be addressed as part of our overall tobacco policy. So I'm curious as to how we're going to do that.
So, Madam President, members of the board, absent of an actual policy and looking at the language, you know, we know that, was it Roswell and Las Cruces, I believe? There were 2 other districts that have passed a policy. 9?
You need to come to the podium.
And so, you know, I think we can obviously take a policy, mirror the language, and do it. I think the real problem is in the enforceability. You know, we're not going to be searching people to see that they have, you know, tobacco. And so you know, I think it sends a clear message that it's not allowed on school property, but it's, I think, you know, the issue will be the enforcement. And I know that Mr. Salpidris, we discussed it in cabinet. Mr. Granada, I don't know if you want to elaborate any more than what I've said thus far, that the real issue is enforcement. I think having the policy is not difficult to do, but how they actually enforce it is another question. And so, you know, we just kind of spun around on it. I don't think we came up with any real solution about how you enforce it for adults.
I'd love to let these folks make some comments, if you have some brief comments to make. You can keep it super short. 9 districts in the state of New Mexico, we think, as of tomorrow.
So, hello, I'm Elena. I'm part of Evolvement at Capitol High School. I'll let Karina introduce herself. Hi, I'm Karina. I'm also part of Evolvement at Capitol.
Can we get last names, please, for the record?
Karina Tarango.
Thank you.
Elena Pearson.
Thank you.
And so basically we're here tonight because...
And your name, please.
I'm Ashley Wagner.
Thank
I'm
you.
with Evolvement. So basically we're here tonight because Santa Fe Public Schools is so close to adopting a comprehensive policy. I know that you all updated your policy in October 2018, and everything is comprehensive except this one thing, which is not allowing visitors to possess tobacco products on campus. And basically, if you do adopt a policy fully, you know, we give you free signage, we try to get you positive media attention, technical assistance, anything we can do to become a resource to Santa Fe Public Schools, we will do. These students here are very passionate about it. Will you tell them why?
So I think going into high school, you know, you see it all the time at football games and you see it everywhere. And for me, I didn't exactly realize how dangerous it was, and so I'm here just to kind of spread the word. And it kind of sends a message when other people, adults, when they possess this product, it sends a message to youth like us that it's okay to be doing this, but in reality, it's not.
I personally am very passionate about this topic because my middle school sister comes home and tells me that students are smoking cigarettes or smoking vapes in school grounds. And if they see adults doing it, like even teachers, they think it's okay that students can do it as well.
Board Member Carrillo, then Board Member Cashman.
So, Ashley, the thing that I would be, thank you very much, all of you, for coming up here, Ashley from Albuquerque. So the thing, and girls for speaking this evening. So I completely agree. So the challenge that I would think would be enforcement as well. So somebody has, a vaping, an e-cigarette, e-cigarette, and it's just on the front seat of their car while they're going into, school. Maybe it's even just for their kids', parental meeting or something. And then security sees this on the vehicle. How has enforcement been handled at these other sites where this language has been approved?
I'm not sure how they're handling enforcement. I mean, I have not heard of any school districts searching vehicles. I don't think anybody's going that far. I just think that they're making it clear with the signage and letting visitors know that when they're on campus, tobacco is not allowed. So I don't think it's going as far as searching vehicles or anything like that.
To the best of your knowledge, in any of these districts, has anyone been, I don't know what you do, you ticket them, I don't know what we'd do with them, but has security in any of these districts, said to them, look, you're not allowed to have this anymore on campus, this includes parking and everything else, so please, next time, just leave all this stuff at home. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So like in a lot of the policies, it will say that if a visitor is caught possessing, that they will ask them to, put away or, get it out of sight. And then if they see it again, that they will ask them to leave the premises. So it's not like I said, it's not like searching vehicles or anything like that. It's just making it clear that we don't want to see it on campus.
So it seems like in terms of this particular issue, this like little sticking point, if you will, that we're making a point by being all in.
Yes.
Okay. And so in that way, I would completely support changing our policy language so that we're all in, so that as part of the policy, the AR is exactly as Ashley said, where it's like, look, you cannot have this here, and if you do it again, you're going to be asked to leave. Please take it, put it away, and if you do it again, you're going to be asked to leave. But whatever, because the AR is the enforcement. But I think it's important that we join forces with those other districts and with New Mexico Tobacco-Free Schools to be all in, especially because our district has been all in on things like this for the last, 8 years. Since Linda, and whether it's the NRA thing, whether it's whatever it is, we've never been half in, we're always all in. And I'd like us to be on this as well.
Board Member Cashman.
Well, my questions were on the same line as Board Member Carrillo. How do we enforce it? We already have signage, I believe, at all of our sites saying tobacco is not allowed. And so I'm concerned that we put a policy in that, or something that we can't enforce, and I don't want somebody to get gung-ho and take somebody's cigarettes, and then we've got a different issue that they took somebody's property. So I think we need probably legal to give us a little bit that legally, how do we enforce that if we're going that step? Because I'm not sure we can enforce it, but. Yeah, so so I'm concerned. We have the signage, but Superintendent?
Madam President. Yes. Madam President, members of the board, I totally believe that the more difficult we make it for people to smoke, the more people wind up quitting, right? And I think that's the whole point, that we know that does wind up being fatal for most people that smoke eventually, and secondhand smoke and whatnot. It's easier with, I think, people who visit our campus to say, you're off campus, maybe you can't come back if you're going to continue to keep violating our policy. More worried about staff. Because we have staff that do cross the street at some of our sites, and during a break or during lunch will go off and smoke and come back on campus. And so unless they're stashing their cigarettes across the street or somewhere, they obviously have them on their person. And so that's my only concern around enforcement. I think other places do have had to deal with it, but I do think that in the long run, it does send a message that probably will discourage some people to, or maybe cause them to quit smoking, which would be a good thing, but it will be a little problematic.
Board Member Carrillo.
I don't necessarily think it would be problematic. I think we can be all in and augment our public policy as it currently stands. And that in the AR, because that's really where all this enforcement stuff is spelled out, no, we're not going to be draconian. We're not going to try to take their stuff, because that does open up another can of worms. But I think we're sending a very strong message that we don't condone this. And you bring up a good point, Dr. Garcia, around people going across the street and, smoking, or people, like I'm thinking if I was at Milagro and, it's lunch and everything and I'm out in the courtyard and I see teachers going across to Mucho's or whatever and then smoking on the way, or maybe they're even, God forbid, going to the darn vape store that's less than 300 feet away to get refills, it does send a really bad message to our kids. So, and, I don't think it's, obviously we can't enforce it, but I don't think it's too much to ask our staff to, get some Nicorette chewing gum while you're in school hours, because what you mirror in behavior affects our children. So I would ask, and I don't know if there's two others that would agree, since this is on board discussion and possible action, that we move toward, adding to our policy the language that's suggested, and then having the superintendent bring something back to us that works for us in terms of language and the administrative reg on how it's going to be carried out.
On that point, Madam President, we don't bring the ARs back to the board.
Well, in this case, you don't have to bring it back to us, but I know the board's going to ask, what's your plan? So just you can, I know you don't bring ARs back, but on this particular thing, since we're bringing up enforcement, we're all going to probably want to know, what do you think is going to be the procedure, or how will it be, how will this play out if?
So I am hearing that this is critically, to my view, a communications exercise, and I'm happy to support it in that regard. And I think Dr. Garcia is pretty right on in that when it's discouraged and made less easy, that people do tend to smoke less. So I'm happy to move forward on this. I'm actually of the view that we could put in the policy that we are not going to confiscate property. And, I think we need to see an amended policy. But I'm happy to support this moving forward. I think, again, the more we just announce loud and clear that we agree that tobacco products are a public health issue and a problem, and we don't want to see them in our schools, that feels pretty darn good to me. Board Member Cashman.
I guess I'm not opposed to it, but I am concerned. And so my history with moving a workplace to non-smoking was in the military. When the military initially did it, you could not smoke in any of their facilities. And so then everybody smoked. They would go right outside the door of the facility and smoke. And then it was, you can't smoke within so many feet of an entranceway or that, because people were still getting secondhand smoke. And it was disturbing. You go to the hospital and all the doctors and the nurses are standing outside smoking. But I am concerned that, you know, if a teacher is allowed to, or a staff member is allowed to leave campus, and they choose to go and smoke, I hope they don't, but I am also realistic. I don't want to say they can't do that. I mean, you can make it more difficult, but I don't want to say you're not supposed to do that because you're supposed to be setting a good example. And we've had examples in the past where teachers have had moral clauses in their contracts. And so you could be fired for that. So I don't, obviously, smoking is an addiction, but there's a health plan to address that, but everybody doesn't get over their addiction. So I'm just, you know, I'm not leaning towards supporting it, but I think we need to be very careful on what that AR says, as far as I don't want to see any shaming or any penalties against our staff. I would hope they would just choose to not do that, but I don't know.
Board Member Carrillo.
So what I'm hearing is you'd be open to having the superintendent come back with additional language on the policy?
Yes.
That doesn't, okay, terrific. And then for me personally, I have no problem shaming people that smoke or vape, and especially if they do it in front of our kids, because it's stupid and it's unhealthy and it sets a really bad example. That's just me personally. But it seems like we may have three. So Board President, who's there for? 12. So, I mean, I think it's great.
And, you know, please clarify the ask. It's basically to develop a policy in line with what's been requested, and also keeping in mind some of the concerns that would be in the AR, and to bring us a recommendation on an adjustment to our
Yes, ma'am.
tobacco policy. Make sense? I think so. Okay,
Great,
and
thanks.
we had a nod from Vice President Price for the verbal record. That was a very distinct, slow nod. Board Member Carrillo.
Oh, since this one's over, I just had a couple little things for board discussion and possibly to put on the next agenda.
Go ahead.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Ashley, thanks so much for coming up. And girls, thank you so much for coming tonight. Now go do your homework. No, just kidding with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being
I'm
here.
happy you're so involved, students. Absolutely.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So pickleball, check. So I have a question. We read this week, or maybe last, that the New Mexico is going to raise the health care contribution that employees have to pay for their health care in districts and employees and everything else. Is this over and above what we budgeted for this fiscal year? Or is this what we had already anticipated?
Madam President, members of the board, going to double check my answer with Mr. Martinez. We can go to the podium. I'm fairly certain that what they're talking about is what is currently in this year's budget, but I think that they're looking at raising it for the next session. But Mr. Martinez,
So,
well, let me
yeah,
find out if.
no, I understand, but okay, then I want to comment on. Thank you.
I'm sorry, if you don't mind, Board President Noble, Board Member Cashman, if you don't mind repeating the question.
It's actually Board Member Carrillo.
Oh,
He
Board
was
Member Carrillo.
asking
Sorry.
about the issue on the increases in the employees' benefits that he's been reading about. Is that's not for this fiscal year? Is that for, my understanding it's for the next one, for the next legislative session, that what has been increased has already been increased. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
So when you say the next legislative session,
They're
you
coming
mean
up.
for the next fiscal year?
Correct.
Okay, great. Well, I know that we'll make that up. Okay, good, because I was concerned, because I was going to say we should take money from cash for the just, we want to make it up if they're going to get docked again. So, okay, good news. That, check, check. So this one, public forum. I was with a group of folks earlier, teachers and parents, and they brought up that they feel like, and I said, absolutely, this is not the case. They said they feel like we do what we can to discourage people coming to public forum, because sometimes public forum won't happen until like an hour into the meeting between different, we call it board showcase now, but the different things that we have, which I love. I mean, that we showcase our students and different, where we're taking pictures and we're doing all these things. And I told them, I assured them that that's not the case. And, but I just wanted us to be cognizant of, and maybe when building agendas, if there is going to be a heavy kind of first half before public forum, maybe being cognizant and just moving up public forum earlier in the agenda. Because a lot of these folks are parents and teachers who have to get home. And I know it doesn't happen all the time, and I know that none of us would ever, ever intentionally move public forum down. I mean, there are many districts that don't even have public forum. So there's that. And the final thing is, because I'm sure everybody read this.
If I may just comment, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I think we actually, tonight, I think we do need to do a better job figuring out who's in the audience and who's waiting. And if there's people for public forum, we can move things around. If there's people for certificates, that sort of thing. Because that young woman waited a very long time for her statewide winning certificate. I'm now not even remembering what it's for. But also, just to note, public forum, I mean, that was one of the big changes we made on the agenda was to move it up. So where it is now is a reflection of that sentiment, and I hope that we, and I will pledge that I will make a better effort to understand who's in the room for what, and make sure that we really use everybody's time as well as we can, especially, you know, there are often things, it's very difficult to predict, frankly, where we are going to eat up a bunch of time on discussions. I almost never realize where some of those places are going to be when I'm doing the
I think you do a fine job of
informal
managing
prediction
that. Yeah.
ahead of time.
No, I think you do a fine job of managing that. Oh, someone's always going to wait. So is it going to be the person at public forum, or is it going to be the high school band? I mean, it's like all these things you got to toss around. So I said I would bring it up, and I brought it up. Now the last thing, no, did I? Oh, sorry about that. And so the last thing, and this really is the last thing unless somebody says something that piques my interest, we are having a swimming pool crisis in the city of Santa Fe. And I would say it's, I'm sorry Ms. Wagner's not here tonight, Yonda Wagner, because this is, we always knew it was kind of brewing, but we always worked it out. And I know how much you want to have the Tina Griego pool back. I don't know that that site is the best idea. But as I understand it, it's becoming increasingly difficult for the public to use different pools because of all of the constraints around different people that have different programs, including our public schools. And then, so it would seem like, and you're on CRC, which is why I'm bringing this up, that we may really want to think about having this in the next bond, having a Santa Fe Public Schools aquatic facility. So we no longer have to negotiate our kids going at 6 in the morning to the Chavez Center or 7 in the evening to the Chavez Center. But having the CRC really look into the benefits. And this would be for obviously all of our schools to enjoy, hopefully centrally located. And it just seems like it's time for us to really begin looking at this for the next bond cycle.
Board Member Cashman.
Having spent a lot of time in the swimming program with either my kids starting out at SEALs or swimming for the high school swim team or lifeguarding for the city, it's a very complex issue. And one of the biggest problems that the city is having is not only to maintain their assets, but they have lifeguards. You can't have a public pool without lifeguards. And that, I mean, many of our students become lifeguards, but they can't, you know, they're competing, and frankly, some pools offer more than what the city is offering to lifeguard. My daughter spent the last summer lifeguarding for the city, and they've spent many summers lifeguarding for the city. But lifeguards are, I don't understand why it's so difficult, but lifeguarding is probably, the city has a lot of problems having enough lifeguards to man even the current pools that they have.
Now, to note, generally we don't discuss items that aren't on the agenda, and we're sort of going deep into that territory. So if...
Sorry, can we put this on the next board discussion?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's not manning, it's staffing. We have to be correct.
What do you want it listed as? Can you provide the words?
And this has nothing to do with the city. Santa Fe Public Schools Aquatic Facility.
Board Member Cashman?
I'll leave it to the discretion of the president, but I would like either on the October 1st or the October 15th meeting, under board discussion, declining enrollment, aging facilities. What do we do as a board?
Okay, I was gonna say it differently. Sorry to interrupt, but I was gonna say, rezoning, rebalancing, rethinking.
Well.
Yeah, but we'll go with.
But we do need to. We promised the public that we would address it. Board members felt uncomfortable making a decision based on having a new governor and the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit. We've seen what has happened with both of those. We need to discuss it. It is a crisis for this district. And so I would like us to have a discussion, and I don't think we need to ask the superintendent to reinvent the wheel. This is really a political discussion among the board, but we do need to have this discussion and let the public know where we need to go. I think there's no doubt on how I feel about it, and I do not think we should be saying, because we have board elections, we can't touch this. There's only one board member that is affected by board elections from this present composition, because Board Member Garcia is running unopposed, and I think we as a board are more than capable of making a recommendation or a discussion. So I'll leave it whether you want to put it on October 1st or October 15th, but that's what I want on the board discussion.
Okay, and I support that. I want to discuss it as well. Board Member Carrillo. Wait, sorry. Vice President Price and then Board Member Carrillo.
I just want to, I started to write all this down and then I decided not to. Let's be careful about using acronyms without using the full term for the public. What is an AR? What is a CRC? Just say the full. Right. Just say the full name first time you use it. We were pretty lax about that tonight, so I would like us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and remember my broadcasting training. Board Member Carrillo.
Whether it's the 1st or the 15th, I'd like it to be noticed correctly. I mean, so if someone's reading the agenda, they know what's actually going to be discussed. I'd also ask that it not be on for board discussion, because depending on the agenda, board discussion, or that item could end up not being there till 9 o'clock. And if there are people that are really interested in it, that's a long time to ask them to wait if they're wanting to see what's what. I would also try to keep in mind that if it's noticed, if it's noticed not just correctly, but with transparency, I would say odds are you're going to have a lot larger public forum. So being prepared for that. And then as well, having it earlier on the agenda. I'm sorry, but I can't help but think sometimes no one's listening to me. Oh, over there. I'm sorry.
Absolutely heard all of.
Okay, but I don't know that because all I do is I see, so thank you. But sometimes it feels that way. So thank you.
I heard everything you said. I don't necessarily agree with all of the approach. I do think it needs to be clearly noticed on the agenda, and, you know, we'll think through how to work this. Chances are we're not discussing it once. Okay, we are on to advanced planning. We have the legislative breakfast tomorrow morning. See you all bright and early.
Sorry, do not look at your agenda. It's not at 610 Alta Vista, it's at Milagro. Okay?
Thanks so much for saying that.
Yes, thank you.
It's
I
at-
would have been here.
It's at Milagro,
And I
so
am unhappy.
please, everybody be at Milagro, not 610.
We'll have a sign on the door. I didn't catch that.
Oh, when it was over there? Oh. Isn't that amazing, the facility? Oh, no. Oh, no.
And on the Region 2 meeting, Board Member Carrillo and Vice President Price, I believe you agreed to go?
Yes, and I had agreed to go, and a work obligation has come up. I'm going to call John Paul Romero tomorrow to let him know, because I really do love going, really enjoy going to these. And I would just ask Secretary Price, Vice President Price, if you're okay with it, if Dr. Garcia, if you could give Secretary Price, I would say maybe, Vice President Price, maybe 20 copies of the vaping resolution, because part of the resolution was in the bottom, therefore, that we were going to work with other school boards to have their efforts in moving in the legislature. In this way, you'll have copies. And if you wouldn't mind doing that, that'd be great. Terrific. And I'll call Jean Paul tomorrow morning.
Yes, we'll do that.
Because that's Thursday, right? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anything else on advanced planning? I think we are good then. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Thanks.